I'll be reading from the New International Version, God's inspired holy word. Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 35. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off, and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear."
Good morning. This morning, we had the blessed opportunity to introduce a new brother into the fold of Christ. Would you please stand? This morning, Du Dong was baptized into Christ, and if you didn't get a chance to see it, that's just a bummer. Thank you. Du explained to me that he was a mailman, right, for a man who was a member at Crosstown. And this is the man that planted the seed and that invited him to come to church, and this eventually led him to be baptized today. So it was his job that got him baptized. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Getting a job is difficult. And I mean, that's something that we can nearly all relate to in this economy, right? I mean, I've sent in applications to numerous places every semester at Harding, and I get rejected from places that claim that they're hiring in huge, giant ads. I mean, I'm not picky. I'm not looking for much. You know, I'll do whatever job comes along. I'll do fast food. I'll do sales. I'll do outside labor. At this point, I would even consider preaching. It's difficult to be hired. Even places with no standard are turning people down these days. Excuse me, Pizza Hut, but I believe that anyone can do your job. But even these simple jobs have requirements, right? If you do not have citizenship, you cannot work for us. If you do not have a driver's license, you may not apply here. If you have a criminal background, we will not accept your application. If you don't have job experience, you are not qualified for this position. These requirements and all the other teamwork evaluation type questions fill up an application. You pick it up and you start answering this monotonous survey. I mean, all applications are pretty much the same, and even the same applications have some of the same questions on them. And how many times do you want me to tell you that I will take initiative? So these easy, no-brainer jobs, even they have a rigorous process of interrogation and a long list of requirements and necessary attitude styles. It's not easy to be the right person, even for that kind of easy job. So how much worse must it be to apply for a job that is truly difficult? A job that requires a degree, or work that's harsh on the body but at the same time requires quick thinking. A job where employees must have good judgment, people skills. A profession where you must be able to sell or build or repair or manage expertly and efficiently. How hard must it be to fill out that application and to earn that job? We fill out these applications because the work is better and the work is more meaningful. But it certainly is a challenge to obtain a job like that. Can you imagine picking up an application and it only containing 4 questions? This job looks very promising. New things are going on in this field. Foundations are being shaken, and the old way of doing things is being challenged. No one else can boast the amazing accomplishments of this employer, and no one else seems to be able to challenge him. This is the job of a century. This is the job that anyone ever would be blessed to have. And the application has 4 questions. So you pick it up, and the first question is, do you hate your family and yourself? You chortle a little and nearly just slash the no bubble. The answer is simple to this absurd question, but then you notice that underneath it is written, if you answered no, then you are not qualified for this position. Luke 14, verses 20, Luke 14, verses 25 and 26 say, "Now great multitudes were going along with him, and he turned and said to them, 'If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, and his wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple.'" We know that these men who Jesus talks to weren't disciples. They obviously weren't qualified. We know this because when Jesus was captured, they all thought of their own wives and their children. They all gave up on him because they valued their families more than their Savior. They valued their own lives more than him. Far from hating themselves, they loved their own skins enough to save them when their teacher was being beaten and persecuted. We know that these men weren't disciples because Jesus went to the cross alone. And so you read these lines on the application over again and again. What did you miss? Are you understanding the question correctly? Maybe there's some kind of hidden double negative. Maybe it's a typo. Surely you're just reading it wrong. Well, since that question is obviously faulty, you skip it for now and you move on to the next question. The second question reads, do you want to be abused, persecuted, and possibly murdered? You blink and you rub your eyes. It still says the same thing. Does anybody want this? The answer is obviously no, but you look for the clause that surprised you from the last question, and sure enough, it's present here too. If you answered no, then you are not qualified for this position. This has to be a joke. Maybe the application is meant to test your sanity. You expected requirements along the lines of social skills or leadership talent or past experience. Instead, they seem to be looking for someone who's antisocial and suicidal. This is the job of a lifetime. Surely it will go to savvy men of eminent aptitude. But the demands seem not to determine any kind of skill. And you're not doing well so far on this application. Luke 14, verse 27 says, "Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. We know that that crowd Jesus addresses was not a crowd of disciples. They thought that they knew what they were getting into. Jesus was there to heal them, provide for them, and make them feel good about themselves, right? He wanted to save them from evils that they didn't even know existed. But when he walked under the weight of those wooden beams, marching toward his purpose, stepping up to become a sacrifice, they gave up on him. When Jesus was at his moment of most need, most weakness, and most beauty, that is when all these unqualified men fell away. We know that these men weren't disciples because Jesus went to the cross alone. So at this point in the application, you're just confused. This whole process doesn't make any sense, but you read on, mostly out of curiosity. The third question reads, will you forfeit all of your finances and belongings for this job? You don't even question what will be written beneath it. If you answered no, then you are not qualified for this position. Now that is just totally backwards. You get a job so that you can obtain more things, not get rid of all your things so that you can obtain a job. What is even the point of working for this employer if you're going to start out broke and homeless? You heard that he travels a lot, but this is ridiculous. How could all of this be expected out of every employee? Who is qualified for this position? What kind of bizarre workforce must this man command? Luke 14, verse 33 says, so therefore, no one of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. We know that these people weren't disciples. Of course, they wouldn't give up their earthly possessions. That's what Jesus was there for. He was feeding them through his miracles, and they believed that he would soon establish Judea as a powerful earthly kingdom. He was there to make their lives easy and enjoyable. So when he went out to die, and they realized that he had no physical prize to offer them, they left. They saw him as a fraud. They wouldn't give up what they had because he was supposed to bless them with more things, and their lack of sacrifice necessitated his sacrifice. We know that those men weren't disciples because Jesus went to the cross alone. So you've decided that this application is laughable. You were skeptical even before you began reading. How could a job like this only have 4 questions to ask of an employee? You shake your head as you look down and read the final question. Do you improve the world with your life? Beneath this one, it has a slightly different statement. If you have answered no to any of the questions above, please answer no for this question. If you answered no, then you won't ever be qualified for this position. Now this application is just trying to be offensive. To reject someone from a job is one thing, but to tell them that they will never be able to work for you is just rude, especially if you're unqualified based on these questions. You're totally baffled by this application. It seems that earning this job is a hopeless endeavor. There's no way that you're qualified with these ridiculous questions. Who could answer yes to all of this? Luke 14, verses 34 and 35 say, therefore salt is good, but even if salt has become tasteless, with what will it be seasoned? It is useless either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown out. He who has ears, let him hear. We know that these men weren't disciples. There's no way they retained their taste. They were feeding off Jesus like parasites. Receiving the blessings of his miracles was about all they could do successfully. They didn't even comprehend when he preached to them. Though seeing they did not see, though hearing they did not understand. In the most important event of humanity's existence, the sacrifice of God for them, these men turned up their noses or ran with cowardice. At the greatest opportunity to faithfully work for our God, they failed miserably. We know these men weren't disciples because Jesus went to the cross alone. This word is a document that was written for people long ago. Ancient people were its audience, and people long dead are the ones that it was spoken to. But our belief is that what is written here is not just for those people, but for all people of all times. The messages are timeless, and Jesus' words must be heeded then, now, and until the world ends. So if we believe this, then we need to consider ourselves in the situation of this crowd. Jesus has just given us the application. He has informed us of what it takes to be his disciples. And just like us, those people probably considered themselves his disciples already. And in practice, they were. So why would he bring this up? Don't we already have what it takes? What else do we need but to believe in Jesus? It's really easy to point the finger and think that tough teachings don't apply to us. We're experts at dodging responsibility in our own heads. If you'll recall, in the section before this, Jesus had told them the parable of the dinner party. This is where the wealthy man, who represents God, wants to throw a party and invites plenty of guests. So even though his party will be grand and he is a gracious host, the first people that he invites all make excuses and bow out of the invitation. So those people in the story, they're Jews, right? That's what the parable is about. Those people will make ridiculous excuses and miss out on the blessed rewards of God. Those people will receive the first invitation and they'll reject it. Those people will waste the goodness of the Lord because of their love of the world. Well, guess what? The crowd he was talking to probably assumed that he was talking about those people. Jesus doesn't tell us the problems that might befall those people. He tells every person to their face what they will do wrong if they cannot give up their love of the world and embrace him fully. So, since the crowd obviously didn't understand the parable, he continues to warn them, this time in straightforward language. Look, he says, I don't know who you people think you are, but you are not qualified to be my disciples. And since we fail to understand that the parable is telling us to be cautious, to guard our actions, and that we're not worthy, he continues to explain to us, look, you aren't worthy to be my disciples. So then, are we disciples? Of course we don't hate our families. Of course we don't hate ourselves. We like God's word, but we're not going to be persecuted because of it. Obviously we're not going to give up everything we have. We didn't walk here barefoot. We're the salt of the earth, though, right? Overall, we make a positive difference in this world. We work hard to follow God's commandments, so we haven't lost our taste. We'll look closer, though, because Jesus is saying that if the salt can't meet the requirements of a disciple, then it's flavorless. So are we disciples? We aren't qualified. If our girlfriend or boyfriend pleads, we'll go further than we should. When our rebellious teenager puts up a fight, we give in rather than hold them to the standards of a Christian. When our spouse wants more time with us, the first thing to be sacrificed is our already scarce devotional time with the Father. When we are alone and free to do whatever we like, rather than crack open that dusty tome, the Holy Bible, we feed our ego, our boredom, our addiction. When that person at work is glorifying their immoral actions, we shy away, afraid of the persecution of our peers. And when the church gives its resources to a cause, we hoard our money, time, and effort, perhaps giving a little if we feel generous. We love ourselves and those around us more than we love God. We flee from persecution, unwilling to suffer for God. We give little and keep the best for ourselves rather than give it all for God. We are not qualified for this position. So, are we disciples? We know that we're not qualified to be disciples because Jesus went to the cross alone. So, you're standing there with the application that has already told you the outcome of your answers. You're still stunned and in total disbelief of this preposterous test. But as it says, you're not qualified. So what's even the point of turning it in? And then you notice that there's something else written at the bottom, beneath all the questions. It says, please consider the costs before turning in your application. Well, the costs must be great. It sounds like this employer wants you to be free of any burden. Apparently, he doesn't want family, health, fear, or possessions to decrease your efficiency. And beneath that, it says, all applicants will receive a position. So how can salt regain its taste? It's thrown away, of course. And yet, that seems to be an unsatisfactory answer. Surely we aren't thrown out. Surely Jesus doesn't give up on us that easily. The answer is the answer of what a human has to do with useless salt. That is what a normal employer would have to do with the application of a hopeful worker that doesn't meet the requirements. We have no way of restoring flavor, of righting wrongs, of redeeming ourselves, of perfecting our actions. Only God is capable of doing that. Jesus has created a paradox. No one in the world is qualified to be his disciple. And yet anyone who believes in him and works for the Father is. Our God is one who requires much from his people. He is holy, and thus we must be holy. So the problem is that we constantly fall short. The problem is that we've perverted his creation and ourselves to the point that the most righteous man isn't even worthy to serve God. Luckily, for our sake, so that we can have a relationship with him, God redeems us. Though we were black and reproachable, he cleanses us and replaces our sin with righteousness. He trains us on the job. Therefore, much is required of this position. We risk having to reject even loved ones to be a disciple of Jesus. There will definitely be times that we have to reject ourselves. There will be times when we must be reviled and attacked by the world because of who we serve. Every belonging must be worthless to us so that we can give it all to God. We need to consider the cost before coming forward. However, if we do decide that this job is right for us, if we decide that we want to be included in the workforce of the Lord, all that is needed to be accepted is to turn in the application with a no checked under every necessity of discipleship. We will come to the great employer. God will take our imperfection and he'll make it into effective tools for his will, and we will work for the Lord forever. Let's stand and sing.